Boney M., a popular band from the 1970s, was founded and led by legendary disco producer Frank Farian, who passed away on January 23 at the age of 82. Frank Farian recorded a disco tune by himself in his studio in 1974, according to his family. He sung the high notes as well as the deep male voice. He then recruited 4 dancers to act as the band. Millions of people thought Bobby Frell was singing those hits for decades, but it was all a hoax. The voices are actually those of someone else. Bobby was poor and lonely when he passed away in 2010. Farian, meanwhile, had earned more than $50 million. Everything fans believed they knew about Boney would be destroyed if they discovered who actually sang those songs. Frank Farian struggled as a music producer in Germany in 1974. His name was unknown to most people, and he was 33 years old. He recorded an odd disco tune called Baby, Do You Want to Bump one night while he was by himself in the studio. Both the high falsetto and the deep male parts were performed in his own voice. He then released the song under the fictitious moniker Boney M., without disclosing the truth to anyone. He was shocked to learn that the song was a hit in Belgium and the Netherlands at the beginning of 1975. At that moment, he took a risk. He made the decision to locate actual persons to pose as the band on television. However, he never intended for them to sing. As they lip-synced and danced, he already knew he would continue to videotape everything himself. From that point on, the falsehood continued unabated. In 1975, Maisie Williams became a member of the group. She had just won the Miss Black Beautiful pageant 2 years prior, and was a 24-year-old Montserrat native. She had been asked to perform by a talent agent who had seen her at a restaurant. Maisie answered yes, since she didn't want to pass up the opportunity. However, she was unaware of what awaited her. Frank Farian had no intention of using her voice. He publicly stated in a 1978 interview that her voice wasn't suitable for the song. Watching herself play music she had never actually recorded taught Maisie this lesson the hard way. Performance money was all she received. No credit, no royalties. Black Beautiful People was the name of the group she had previously led. She was simply lip-syncing other people's work now. The tale of Bobby Frell was equally tragic. He was from Aruba and was 26 years old. He was an energetic, wild dancer who was employed by Farian in 1975. Fans heard Bobby's deep voice on records, but he was unable to sing it. It was Farian's voice. Bobby mimicked a puppet by moving his mouth to the recording during live performances. Supporters believed he was singing. However, people realized that his real voice didn't match any time the microphone was in use. He danced to someone else's voice for the duration of his Boney career. He was never the artist he seemed to be. Although Boney M's name sounded unusual, it was derived from something extremely commonplace. Farian first saw the closing titles of the Australian detective series, Boney, in 1974. He mentally repeated it because he liked the way it sounded. Boney, Boney. For rhythm, he then added the letter M. That arbitrary moniker would eventually be associated with some of the most well-known disco singles in history. But there was no mystery about it. Farian began to tighten his hold in 1975. Everyone had rigorous contracts from him. The group members didn't get paid for the records, they were only compensated for their performances. Farian kept all the royalties, because he was the one doing the most of the recording. This meant that the performers on stage received only a modest percentage, even though Boney M had 38 cassette top 10 hits in Germany between 1975 and 1988, with 15 of those reaching number 1. The people dancing in front of the crowd were treated like paid laborers, even after 3 of their songs became some of the best-selling singles in Britain ever. Farian earned over 800 gold and platinum awards and amassed millions of dollars. The actors who made the group come to life remained in the background. Then 1976 arrived. Everything changed because of Daddy Cool that year. The group's fame skyrocketed after they performed on Musikladen. The song peaked at number 1 in Germany and number 6 in the UK. However, it was Frank Farian, not Bobby Farrell, who danced with flair but had his microphone off, who said, "She's crazy like a fool." In 1977 they released Ma Baker, which was based on a real outlaw named Ma Barker, but Farian changed the name to Baker because he thought it sounded better, and the lyrics called her the meanest cat in old Chicago. Later, Farian acknowledged that the group was formed only to give life to his music on stage. Boney M was created as an illusion from the beginning. The song even claims she died in a shootout where she fought back. But in reality, she was killed in gunfire but never fired a weapon. Historians believe J. Edgar Hoover exaggerated her story to justify her death, and Berean turned that into disco fiction. However, real history said she wasn't a gang leader, but rather a mother who couldn't control her sons. When their first album, Take the Heat Off Me, was released in 1976, it was also a lie. Fionn did all the male vocals. Half of the group's faces weren't even on the record, and Maisie Williams didn't sing a word because Fionn felt her voice didn't fit. Instead, he used session singers, and only two Jamaican vocalists, Liz Mitchell and Marcia Barrett, actually sang. When a technical glitch occurred during a live European tour, in 1977, the playback stopped working, while Bobby Frell continued miming. And all of a sudden there was no sound. The audience watched as he moved his mouth, but nothing came out. This truth wasn't fully revealed until 1978, leaving Maisie humiliated and pushed aside from the success. Journalists began to question them, but the management remained silent and carried on with the show, as if nothing had happened. It was awkward and almost blew their cover. Sunny, another big hit in 1976, topped charts in multiple countries. But behind the scenes, Fionn kept the money coming. One former member claimed that Farion was very vindictive, and that they weren't just fighting over money, but also for recognition. Later legal battles revealed that Fionn owned the rights, and that the performers received flat fees. When members attempted to use the Boney NN name, Farion blocked them, sent legal letters, and even barred them from his studios for speaking out. In 1978, Rivers of Babylon sold over 2 million copies in the UK, and topped the charts for 5 weeks. But it wasn't even their song. The lyrics were taken from Psalms 19 and 137, and were originally written in 1970 by a Jamaican group called the Melodians. When Boney M released their version, the first copies didn't give credit to the original authors. It was another instance of Fionn taking what he wanted, and only making changes when compelled. And that same year, in December 1978, Boney M toured the Soviet Union. Farion and his co-writer put their names on it instead, and the Melodians sued because they hadn't given permission. Eventually, an agreement was reached, and later versions added the correct credits. But the damage was done. Their song Rasputin, which was supposed to be a huge cultural moment, offended the Russian government, because it said that Rasputin was the Russian queen's lover, which officials found offensive. KGB agents attended the shows dressed like ordinary people, and if anyone danced too wildly or clapped too much, they were removed, and the audience was forced to sit still. It was a bizarre show at a city where politics and history were taken extremely seriously, and the group had never witnessed such icy quiet before. Historians criticized Rasputin, saying the song was full of lies, and that he wasn't a playboy. In 1979, Bobby Frell's behavior began to cause problems, missing rehearsals and acting strangely. Fionn had transformed a complex man into a cartoon character, calling him Russia's greatest love machine just to sell records. Russian scholars were incensed, saying he was using serious history as a joke. He was a mystic connected to the Tsar's family because of his healing claims. There is no evidence that he had a romance with the queen. It wasn't just about the voice anymore. Even the body on stage might not be real anymore. In 1980, Boney M released The Magic of Boney M, which had 20 golden hits. Berean didn't want to cause any delays, so he discreetly found someone who looked like Bobby, and used him as a stand-in for some shows. Fans didn't know. Although it peaked at #1 in the UK, fans were taken aback by something in the album. The credits revealed that Liz Mitchell sang lead on 12 tracks, while Marcia Barrett received credit for just 1. However, Barrett had done much more, and her powerful voice, particularly on reggae tracks, was a major component of their sound. She even sang on No Woman No Cry. But Fionn gave Mitchell the credit. In 1981, Bobby Frell finally exploded, after years of having minimed deep male vocals that weren't even his. Fionn decided who got seen, who got heard, and who got paid. The women behind the hits didn't always get the credit they deserved. Barrett's voice was hidden, and her name was pushed aside. It wasn't just about music anymore, it was about power. The producer, Frank Farion, sang those parts, and despite all those TV shows and performances, his voice was never on the actual records. Bobby had had enough and quit after working on the album Boo News, stating that he couldn't continue to pretend, and that they couldn't properly promote the album without him. The illusion behind Boney M was pulled back in that moment. Only Liz Mitchell and Marcia Barrett sang in the studio, and everything else had been smoke and mirrors, so leaving didn't free him from legal issues. When another storm struck in 1982, Marcia Barrett was having a personal crisis, and was unable to continue performing as usual. Bobby Frell was already out, So Frank Farian brought in a new man, Reggie Tebow, who became the new male face of Boney. The Carnival is Over and Jambo were released that year, but neither song lived up to their previous hits, and Marsha's role gradually diminished behind the scenes. Maisie Williams attempted to break free in 1983, but it became clear that Farian didn't care about the lives or struggles of the original group members. He was happy to replace anyone, as long as the Boney M. Brewer brand continued to move forward. It wasn't about music anymore, it was about control. Her voice was hardly audible on the 1985 album I Dance. She wanted to launch her own music career, but she hit a brick wall. Frank Farian, who still had her under contract, had never let her sing on Boney Records, saying her voice wasn't good enough, so she'd only been there to dance and perform live. Now, even trying something solo was difficult. In 1984, Bobby Farrell briefly returned, but Farian stepped in again when Marsha Barrett met with Eddie Grant that year to discuss recording demos for CBS, reminding her that she was still bound to Boney M. The contracts made it nearly impossible to grow outside the shadow of Boney M, and the paperwork held them down no matter what they wanted to do on their own. In an attempt to revitalize the group, they released Kalima Duna and Happy Song, but the spark had vanished. Their album 10,000 Light Year only peaked at number 23 on the German charts, a sharp decline from their previous success. The group was disintegrating internally, members were not getting along, and lawsuits were pending. Some quarreled over who could use the Boney M name, others over money or power, and behind it all, Frank Farian appeared increasingly aloof. By 1985, it seemed as though he didn't even give a damn. Many fans and critics viewed the band's final studio album, I Dance, as a letdown because it lacked the magic of the past. By that year, the financial strain was too great to conceal. A court ultimately decided in 1990 that all 4 original members had the right to perform under the Boney M name, despite Boney M having sold over 100 million records. The group was disintegrating not only emotionally, but also legally, with Farian holding all the power, owning the rights, and receiving the royalties. A lot of people believe that the truth about lip syncing was revealed in 1986, but the truth was known long before that. The court battles continued into the 1990s, and even into the 2000s, and the same question kept coming up: who actually owned Boney M? Was it the man behind the curtain, or the people who stood on stage? Lip syncing was common in the disco world, but by 1986, fans were no longer tolerant, and the final single, Young, Free, and Single, only peaked at number 48 in West Germany. As early as 1978, Frank Farian told Bravo magazine that Bobby Farrell didn't sing on any of the records, even stating that Maisie Williams' voice didn't fit the style. Not because of a scandal, but because of exhaustion. The magic had worn off, and everyone knew the truth had been out there for years. The group quietly split in 1986, after their last studio record failed the previous year. Then Milli Vanilli arrived. Farian's admission in November 1990 that Rob Pellis and Fab Morvan had not performed on their popular album, Girl You Know. It's True went viral, and the pair's Grammy was revoked for the first and only time in history. Rob later claimed that they had sold their souls to the devil, but Farian showed no signs of surprise or remorse. Boney M tried to continue in various forms, from 1987 to 1988, but he told the press that he had done the same thing with Boney M before, that it had always been about the visuals, that the voice didn't matter, and that all he needed were attractive people who could dance and fake it on stage, while real singers stayed in the background. Around that time, several iterations of the group appeared, and Bobby Farrell, who had quit, attempted a solo comeback in 1987 with a song called Hapa Hoa, but it was a complete failure. He understood the Boney M name still had value, even though the music wasn't what it used to be. Liz Mitchell left in the spring of 1989, and every attempt to work without Farian ran into legal issues. Marilyn Sharby replaced Mitchell, but the internal strife continued. In 1988, they attempted a remix album called Greatest Hits of All Times, which appeared to be a reunion, but it quickly fell apart again. Farian still owned the rights to the Boney M name. Everybody Wants to Dance, like Josephine Baker, a song the group attempted to release in 1989, was halted by Farian because he wasn't involved, and the single was withdrawn after he threatened legal action. Farian then created his own version of Boney M with Reggie Tebow and 2 new vocalists. The original members continued to try to tour, but fans became confused because there were so many different versions of the group performing. The lineups changed so frequently that nobody knew who was real anymore. Selena Duncan and Ron Gale were in some lineups, while Carol Gray and Kurt Dodaren were in others. The magic of Bonham's early days couldn't withstand this chaos. The tours didn't generate the same revenue as they used to, and the group's name lost its meaning. The breakup was devastating, according to Maisie Williams, who later said that they didn't just drift apart. By 1990, it was over, not just officially, but emotionally as well. Each member went their own way, and they all tried to use the Boney M name separately. Bobby Frell was permitted to use it in Holland, and formed a new group with 3 female singers. But the financial difficulties persisted. When Bobby Frell hit rock bottom in 1992, he released singles like Pulitsai and Hoa Hopa, but they failed, and he had no money left. His daughter Zenelia claims that he once asked Farian for 100,000 marks. The group collapsed after Bobby left due to loyalty issues with the record company. Fionn consented if Bobby signed a few documents, but Bobby was unaware that he had just given up everything: his image, his rights, and his royalties, and they ended up living with his grandmother in the Netherlands, leaving him homeless in the Gasperdam neighborhood of Amsterdam. Marcia Barrett had to deal with her own nightmare. She was diagnosed with ovarian cancer while producing solo recordings in Munich in the early 1990s. She had no steady income and no support, so she required surgery. When the illness returned, she was unable to work, so she turned to Farian for assistance, but he offered her nothing. The title of her 1999 album, Survival, said it all. In 1995, Maisie Williams tried to fight back, launching her own Boney M tour and going to court to defend her rights, spending more than $100,000 in legal fees. Farian fought hard. In a 2001 interview, she said she had been through hell and back. Liz Mitchell also attempted to move on, and in 1998 she released a gospel album called Let It Be, which featured songs like Mighty God and Sermon on the Mount, but sales were poor. Farian wanted complete control, regardless of how long it had been, and Maisie faced lawsuit after lawsuit, even though Bobby's daughter later claimed Farian hadn't registered the name everywhere. Farian once said that everyone could be replaced except for Liz, but even she wasn't spared. In 2000 there was one last chance. A reunion was planned, but Bobby showed up intoxicated, and a heated argument broke out, which was captured on camera. Liz claimed in interviews that she had suffered from depression, and that years of manipulation and forged contracts had crushed her. That fight marked the final collapse. A group that had once sold 100 million records was now just broken pieces. Bobby Farrell died on December 30, 2010, while in St. Petersburg, Russia. The moment spread like wildfire throughout the industry, revealing how broken things truly were: addiction, betrayal, pain. The scars were too deep. The date, which was the same day and city where Rasputin had died 94 years earlier in 1916, was what made people freeze. Bobby, who sounded the voice of Boney M's hit song Rasputin, which peaked at number 2 on the UK charts in 1978, had just finished performing the song at a corporate party when hotel staff discovered him dead the following morning. People couldn't help but notice how odd it all was. Bobby, who had sung about Rasputin for decades, died in the same city on the same day that he was poisoned, shot 4 times, and thrown into a freezing river. That uncanny connection sparked conspiracy theories online. The truth is that Bobby had been ill for a long time. According to his agent, John Sen, he had heart problems, breathing difficulties, and stomach issues that never went away for 10 years. But he refused to stop performing. Some people blamed it on fate, while others said it felt cursed. Even though he was already experiencing breathing difficulties on December 29th, the day before he passed away, he went on stage in St. Petersburg, sang through it, gave the audience what they had come for, and then flew to Rome for a New Year's Eve TV appearance. He was alone in his hotel room, exhausted and in pain when his body failed him. In 2005, Bobby's daughter Zenelia claimed that producer Frank Farian had taken everything away from her father. Bobby's agent said that Bobby had a big heart but was unpredictable. That night, there was silence: no doctor, no friend, no one. His life had been taken from him long before that. Farian, who had helped create one of the biggest bands of the disco era and sold more than 50 million singles and 60 million albums, was forced to sign documents giving up all his rights in exchange for Bobby's desperate request for 100,000 marks. This meant that he would not receive any royalties, image rights, or music from Boney M. However, following that transaction, Bobby lost everything: and his family was forced to live on government assistance with his mother in the Netherlands. She claimed that the stress caused her father to turn to drugs and alcohol, and that his health deteriorated until his spirit vanished. When they performed the autopsy, Russian doctors confirmed Bobby's death from heart disease. This man, who once made crowds dance, died quietly, far away from the spotlight. He was only 61 years old, and his body was taken back to the Netherlands where he was buried. There were no signs of a crime, but the damage was obvious. Years of stress and substance abuse had destroyed his heart. The money, however, was the biggest shock. Fans couldn't believe the man who gave them Rivers of Babylon and Daddy Cool was buried broke. And Bobby died with over $50,000 in debt, no property and no savings, while Frank Farian had made about $50 million from Bonham's success. Online petitions immediately began. His daughter said they had to live on food stamps while Farian lived in luxury, demonstrating how broken the music industry could be. Bobby never noticed a cent, and in some countries he was not even permitted to perform under the Boney M name, because Farian had locked up the trademarks. Those who danced in the spotlights frequently found themselves in the shadows, and even the other members of Boney M experienced pain. On July 13, 2023, Liz Mitchell and her husband Thomas were traveling on the A47 in Cambridge when a car suddenly swerved and struck them, breaking Liz's arm and trapping her inside until rescuers could free her. After the crash, Liz concentrated on getting better so she could go on her next tour. Even though her husband was also hurt, they were going to see her brother Khaled Rashid, who was serving a life sentence for murder. Marcia Barrett also had her own struggles, and on August 20, 2024, she celebrated 40 years of marriage to Marcus James. Marcus had previously played guitar with Eddie Grant, but in their private lives, he was her rock. Marcia battled breast cancer and ovarian cancer in the early 1990s, and Marcus remained by her side the entire time. Their story became one of quiet strength, and they continued to play music. The 82-year-old Frank Farian died on January 23, 2024. He had undergone heart surgery in Miami in 2022 and was given a pig valve, the same type that MC Jagger received. He initially joked about it, saying, "I have a good pig in me." However, his health deteriorated, and he ended up in a wheelchair due to breathing difficulties. His family reported that he passed away quietly. However, those close to him claimed that surgery had been slowly killing him for almost 2 years. Liz Mitchell paid a cold public tribute to him after his death, saying that their music had made the world happy, but omitting any mention of memories or showing any affection. Her farewell was formal and more akin to a press release than a farewell. Then came the biggest shock. Farian's will was made public, and although his estate was worth over $100 million, none of the original members of Bonham, not Liz, not Marcia, and not Bobby's family, were listed. They had created the music, toured, performed, smiled, and sang, and they received nothing. Farian's final years in Miami were quiet and depressing, with hospital reports indicating that he had grown resentful and isolated from the outside world. The survivors, now in their 70s, had to return to court to fight for what they were entitled to, according to the legal team, who said this was no accident and that Farian had planned every aspect of his business. He had spent decades separating Boney M from one another, erecting barriers between them, destroying friendships within the band he had formed, and when he needed someone, no one showed up. After his death, YouTube videos began to become viral. People he had once worked with stopped returning his calls. The videos, which contrasted Bobby's small apartment with Farian's mansion, showed how Bobby Frell had died impoverished, and millions of people watched as he was forced to sign away his rights and use the Boney M name in places where Farian hadn't claimed it. The outrage grew, and people demanded justice. They insisted that Farian's estate pay the debt. The battle continued even after his death.